Hello there and welcome back to my new video. So in this video I want to show you how to create an expandable floating action button. So as you can see, this is our application preview, and when we click on our floating action button we can see two more of those action buttons, and also we can see the animations. And when we click on one of those action buttons we can see this simple toast message. Okay, so here is a simple and basic Android Studio project, and now we're going to start by creating those three action buttons. So first let's remove this text view, and when we try to add our floating action button we see that we need to add first the icons for those action buttons. So before we add those action buttons, let's first add those icons. So I'm going to choose three different icons for three different floating action buttons. So the first icon will be this add icon. The second one will be pen icon. So let's search for the pen. Okay. Here we're going to just change the name to something more simpler. And let's choose the third one. The third one will be an image. So let's select this. Okay. Click next and finish. So now we're going to add our three floating action buttons. So when you try to add one, Android Studio will ask you to add this material dependency for you. So just click OK, and after that let's connect the right and bottom constraint of this floating action button. And those constraints should be 24, for example. And now inside this XML code we're going to add the attribute named focusable to true. And we also want to change the icon color to white. Okay. And also for this first floating action button, I want to change the background color to purple. Alright. And next let's add the second floating action button. Okay, select this pen icon, connect the right and bottom constraint to this first action button. So in the application preview you saw that those last two floating action buttons were a little bit smaller. And we're going to make them smaller with our custom animation resource files. Okay, so now connect those constraints, right? And also add this focusable and this icon color for those two action buttons as well. Okay, and now let's change the IDs of those buttons. So the first button will have the ID of add button. The second button will have the ID of maybe pen button or edit button. It doesn't matter, so this is just an example. And the third one will have the ID of image button. Okay, so that's fine for now. And next what we're going to do, we're going to start and create 4 different animation resource files for our animations. So open up this resource manager and create 4 different animation resource files. The first one will be named rotate open anim, and the second one will be named rotate close anim. So this rotate animation will be used on our first floating action button to rotate. So the first time when we press our floating action button it will rotate from 0 to 45 degree. And the second time we press on that same button it will get back from 45 degree to 0 degree. Okay, the third file will be named from bottom, and the fourth one to bottom. So first let's start with this rotate open resource file. Okay, so here we're going to add just one simple element, which is rotate. And here we need to specify 4 different parameters or attributes. So first, for the pivot point, set that to 50%, and basically that means that our rotation will start from the center of our floating action button. And for the from degree, set to 0, and 2 degrees set to 45. And duration for this animation will be 300 milliseconds. And of course, you need to add this fill after to true on this set element as well. Okay, so after that we're going to copy this code and just paste that inside our rotate close anim, and just change this value from degrees to 45 and 2 degrees to 0. And of course add this fill after to true. Okay, so after that in our from bottom animation resource file we need to create 3 different elements. So the first one is a translate, and that means that our floating action button will move from bottom. So from Y delta set to 100% and to Y delta set to 0%. Okay, so for the duration we're going to set 300 milliseconds. And if you're not familiar with this, for those transition animations and creating a custom animation resource files, I recommend you to watch my video about that, so you can do that. Next element is a scale, and it will have the pivot point exactly the same with 50% as well. For the 2y scale, we're going to set to 0.8 and 2x scale to 0.8 as well, because because this animation will be applied for those two smaller floating action buttons, and they will have the width and height of 80%. And final element is alpha, which is basically an opacity. So we are setting the opacity from 0 to 1 in the duration of 800 milliseconds. And here let's add this fill after to true as well. So let's copy all of that and paste inside our last animation resource file, and just change a few values here. So from y delta to 0 and 2y delta to 100 this time. And here we're going to add two more attributes, from y scale and from x scale, and set them to 0.8 as well. And for our alpha, we need to change duration this time to 150, and from alpha 1 and to alpha 0. So I set this to 100, and I can remove that and just say 1, because it's basically the same. 0 and 1 is the same as 0 and 100. So here as well, set this fill after to true, and now we're going to create all the necessary logic and implement those animations on our floating action buttons. So before that, we need to set the initial visibility of those two action buttons to invisible, because they will be invisible at first. But we're going to change their visibility inside our main activity, so you will see. So just copy this attribute here as well, and those two buttons will be invisible at first. So next, open up a main activity, and here we're going to start by creating 4 different variables for our 4 different animations, and we're going to load those animations here. So let's name the first one rotate open, and I'm going to lazily initialize those animations here. So I'm going to use this class named animation utils to load this animation. So just pass this context parameter, and the second parameter just the resource ID. And let's just copy this code 3 more times and just change this variable name and the resource ID. Okay. So we can have our 4 different animations here as well. Alright, so here to bottom, and specify to bottom anim. Okay. So after that, we need to create on-click listeners for our 3 floating action buttons. So first let's start with this add button, and let's create another 2 on-click listeners. So our edit button and image button will have basically a toast message inside. So we're going to say just simple as edit button clicked, and let's copy this toast message, and we're going to place that message inside our image button on click listener as well. Just change this edit to image. Okay, and our add button will have a new function named on add button clicked, and let's create a new function down below. Okay, so this function will have 2 functions inside. The first one will be named set visibility, and the second one will be named set animation. And both of those functions will have one parameter of a boolean value, of a boolean type. So let's first create those 2 functions here. Okay. And now I need to create one more variable named clicked, and this variable will have the type of a boolean. So this variable will act as an on and off switch, and you will see. So let's add this clicked boolean type as a parameter on those 2 functions. And let's pass this clicked inside. Okay. So first let's start with the set visibility. And we're going to say now here, if this clicked is false, and false is the default value of this variable, then we want to set the visibility of those 2 action buttons, floating action buttons, to visible. Okay. And in else block, I want to set their visibility to invisible. Okay. So next, what I'm going to do, inside our on add button clicked, I want to add if block and say if clicked is false, then I want to assign a new value of true, and if it is true, then I want to assign a new value of false. So this can be shortened, so I'm going to apply this. Okay, and here we say we have an error, so we need to replace this val with var, because we will later reassign this value. So inside our set animation function, we're going to basically do the same as we did inside our set visibility. So if our clicked is false, then we want to start the animation for those 3 buttons. So for edit button and image button, we want to start from bottom animation, and for our add button we want to start rotate open animation. And in else block we want to start those 3 animations as well, but this time for those 2 buttons to bottom and for our add button to rotate close. So basically what we are going to do, at first we have loaded those 4 different animations, and we have created this clicked variable, which is basically the same as on and off switch, and we're going to change that variable value inside our on button clicked method. And here we are calling those set visibility and set animation functions, and we are reassigning the value of this clicked variable from false to true and from true to false. And we're setting visibility and animations accordingly to that value of this clicked variable. So I think this is all self-explanatory, and we should now run our application and check it out. Okay, so let's click this button, and you will see that our add button is rotating from 0 to 45 degree, and those 2 buttons are now visible, and you saw that animation where those 2 buttons are coming from the bottom. And as you can see, we can see those toast messages as well. And now when we press this add button again, this add button will rotate back from 45 degree to 0 degree, and those 2 buttons will disappear. So there is one more problem. So when we click this button again, and when we click this in this empty space, we can basically trigger those toast messages as well. So this is an error, and we will fix that easily by creating a new function. And this function will be named set clickable. Okay, and it will take this boolean as a parameter as those 2 previous methods. So here we're going to say if clicked is false, then we want to set this is clickable to false. Okay, and let's set that to our second floating action button as well. And in else block we want to set this is clickable to true. So let's just copy that and change the value from false to true. Okay. And now we should be able to fix this, and of course call this method inside our on add button clicked. Okay, and let's run our app again. So now when we click on empty space, we are not going to be able to call these toast messages. And when we press this add button and click on those buttons, okay, and nothing happens as well. So okay, I think I know why is this happening. So we mistyped the values in this set clickable function. So here instead of false we need to set true, and down below in else block we need to set the false. Okay, so now everything should work perfectly fine. So now as you can see I'm clicking and nothing happens. And now when you click this add button and click on those floating action buttons, now we can see this toast message, and everything works perfectly fine. So that will be all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please like this video if you find it helpful, of course, and see you in the next one.